Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Sporting Fan Podcast. Today I'm going to talk about the Australian cricket team. As many have seen, the Australians lost over the weekend to Bangladesh in a test match in Darwin. Now, this is the Australia's first test loss to Bangladesh in Australia. And a lot of people are looking at pointing fingers. A lot of the batsmen are under threat, namely Marnus Labuschagne and Jake Weatherall, because of constant bad performances. Now, the test match, in my opinion, goes back to really, it has exposed more than just one test match. Like, sure, I know Australia lost this, and then a lot of people saying, oh, well, it's only one test, and, earlier in the year, they beat England in the Ashes 4-1, over last summer. I think that series covered up a lot of problems, because if you look at the numbers of that test match, of that series I should say, of the Ashes series, there wasn't that many not many Australians that actually scored runs, per se. I'm looking at the stats with that. 2 of the 3 highest run scorers in that series were English. The highest run scorer was Travis Head. Then it was Joe Root. Then there was Harry Brook. So, in that series, Travis Head got Australia out of a lot of issues, in my opinion. That first test in Perth, England, in my opinion, England lost that series rather than Australia won it. And what I mean by that is, if you look at the test by test, England were 40 runs. They only got 172 in the first innings. Australia got bowled out for 132, and they even though they batted poorly, they could have won if they put their head down. And yes, it was a bouncy pitch, but I don't think. And I know people will come at me saying this because, oh, you're only criticising the Melbourne Test because Australia lost. The Perth wicket was challenging. Don't get me wrong; it was it was a testy pitch, but I think it was a lot better pitch than the Melbourne pitch. Even the creator of Melbourne said he got it wrong. I think if someone really knuckled down in the English team, I think they could have won that test match. They were 1 for 100 in the second innings, and then they got bowled out for 164. So they really blew that test, in my opinion. Like, if they, and the only reason why the Australians won is Travis Head went nuts in the second innings and hit 120, got 123 and won the test. If they got an extra, I reckon, when he got out, I reckon if England had an extra 60 or 70 runs in that, because Stephen Smith came in right at the very end there, I reckon if England had another 60 to 70 runs, they win that test match, or it gets very close. I think, if Australia does go on to win, I reckon they go on to win only by 1 or 2 wickets. And then you go through the other test matches, and I just think England, there was a lot of things. I think the bowlers got Australia out of a lot of issues in that series. And I think it was more really poor batting by England rather than anything wonderful the Australians did. Because, Australia only got to 500 once, which was in Brisbane. I look at that when I looked at that series. I look at England had a good chance of winning that series, and a lot of people laughed at Stuart Broad, who said this is the best English team that we've had. That they had, I should say, the best English team that they had since the 2010 and 2011 series, when England won that series 3-1, and they won the 3 Test matches, I believe, by innings, which is only, I think, the second time that's happened. I think that and a lot of people laughed at Stuart Broad with that comment. A lot of people will forget they left out the bit that he said that Australia still goes in as favourites, as Australia at home, they're still dominant. But I honestly think England will look back at that series and they will say they lost it. I reckon they should have won it in Perth. If they'd knuckled down, they could have really while it was, like I said, it was a difficult pitch, they could have won in Perth. And I think they could have potentially, I'm not saying they should have won in Adelaide, but they could have. There was some really poor dismissals in that second innings of England. Like, for example, Harry Brook did a reverse sweep and ended up getting clean bowled. I think if he played a regular sweep, he would have played it would have been a better option, and he wouldn't have got out. I'm not saying England would have won, but I think if Harry Brook didn't do that stupid shot, and there was a couple of other bad dismissals in that second innings as well, where I really thought England really blew it. Like, for example, I believe it was Jamie Smith one where he does a really silly shot of Stark where he hit it straight to Cummins. Those 2 dismissals, Jamie Smith was on 60, Harry Brook was on 30. They only lost the test match. They lost the test match by 82 runs. I think if Harry Brook stayed in, I reckon he could have got to 70 or 80, even 90. And then if Will Jack doesn't play that silly shot, I reckon he could have got an extra 15 or 20 runs as well, which, there's a winning test match. And I reckon, and they had a session, I think it was about a session and a half to go as well, when England ended up getting bowled out. So it wasn't like they got bowled out the last hour of the last session on day 5. There was still a session and a half to go. They got bowled out about halfway through day 5. So, you think about it, and then they end up winning in Melbourne. And Melbourne ended up being basically the reverse of Perth. Australians batted poorly in the first innings. England were even worse in their first innings. So basically Perth, England had a 40-run lead in the first innings, got bowled out cheaply in the second innings. Australia would go on to win the test, and then it's basically the reverse in Melbourne, where Australia had a 40-run lead, batting first, and then batted poorly in the second innings, and then England go on to win that test match. So I think that just shows, I think And that goes on to show where it was. So I think that this is where I come back to the Bangladesh test, that it really exposed the Australians, because if you look at the these batting issues, and I think it's really been evident for a number of years now. I know Australia's been really covered up by the bowlers, and I know people say, "Oh, well, they've been winning, so who cares?" Well, there comes a day where those bowlers are not going to be there. Stark is getting on a bit now. He's mid to late 30s now. Hazelwood's getting injured a lot. So Mitchell Stark's 36. He's 37 in January. So this coming summer he's going to be turning 37. Josh Hazelwood injured a lot, and he's getting on a bit now as well. He's 35. He's 36 also in January. Then you have Pat Cummins as well, who's 33. And then people say, well, there's Scott Boland as well, who with Scott Boland, he's also getting on. He's 37, so all four, and then Nathan Lyon's 38. So those guys are not going to be there for that much longer. I reckon Stark's probably only what's he going to do after the Ashes next year in England? Who knows whether Hazelwood can stay on for that long with all his injuries. Who knows? Boland, again, he may only last until the next Ashes series, and then he'll probably give it away. Nathan Lyon's in the same boat, so they're going to have a lot of their quicks go, and then then you have the other ones that with with experience, like Michael Neser. Michael Neser's 36 as well. He'll be 37 at the end of the next Ashes series, which is next year. And so I look at it and I just go, they're gonna struggle a bit with fast bowlers. They got, they might bring in Jai Richardson, but he's had a lot of injuries. So the bowlers are not going to be able to keep getting them out of a pickle for the longest time. It's mainly Australia's. What I fear that they're going to have is Australia's going to go into a lull like they did around 2008 to about 2013. That 5-year patch where Australia lost. I think they lost basically every Ashes series. They may have won one in that series, that period, but they were basically getting beaten all the time. They were really weak. Basically, once Australia lost all those great players. Hayden retired, Langer retired, Gilchrist retired. Ponting was way past his best in that period. That 2009 to when he retired in 2012. He was a long way from, the legend that we remember. He was way past his best, especially around 2010 to when he retired. He got a broken hand, and after that, he was just not the same player. I think it was a broken finger, actually, not a broken hand, but yeah, he just, I don't know if it was just he couldn't grip the bat properly, lost his confidence or whatever it was, but whatever it was, he was never the same. And then they had the bowlers. Glenn McGrath retired, Warren retired, Lee started getting injured a lot more than what he had previously. So I just look at it and I just go, where does Australia go from there once those fast bowlers retire? Because I just look at it and go, geez, there's not many blokes around. There's no one knocking on the door in domestic cricket. I heard them mentioning during the test match with Bangladesh, the test that they just lost. Apparently the highest average last year in the batting was Sam Constance, who had an average of 33. That's not saying, there's no one there saying, yeah, pick me, like, I'm knocking down the door. Like, when Australia had those great sides from the late 90s to the early to mid 2000s, like, everyone remembers the Hayden, the Langer, the Ponting, Damien Martin, Michael Clark, who came in the mid 2000s, and you had, Gilchrist and Brett Lee and Glenn McGraw and Shane Warne and Jason Gillespie and all those guys. People forget that, yes, those guys are absolute legends. But the reason why Australia was so good was because, yes, those guys are phenomenal players, but they realise that, there's the old expression, competition creates greatness kind of thing, where they knew that if I don't perform, I'm out of the team. Because there was so many guys like Michael Bevan, Stuart Law, Darren Lehman. Even, I know Darren Lehman played quite a bit for Australia, but, he barely could get a game. Michael Hussey couldn't get a game until he was 30. He had like a ton of runs before he got picked. His brother, David Hussey, couldn't even get a game in the test team. He only played one-day cricket for Australia, and he had a mountain of runs, and he had an average of about 50 in first-class cricket. He couldn't get a game for Australia because his team was so good. And then he had, in the bowls, Stuart Clark only really got a game at the end of his career when Gillespie went off a bit. Stuart Clark, phenomenal bowler. There was Stuart McGill, who any other time in history would have probably, if he was born 15 years later, he probably, plays 100 tests and people would be comparing him to Warne. But instead, he's, still, played 40 tests, had a decent career, but comparatively, he could have played 110 tests, 120 tests, and, taken 500, 600 test wickets, right? So I just worried that with the Australian team, once a lot of those guys retire, those bowlers retire in 18 months, Australia's going to go really into a lull, because I think it will really expose the batsmen. Because Australia just doesn't have those. Well, even their starting team at the moment, the batters are not performing. Like, Jake Rotherell's not performing. Marnus Labuschagne has barely got a run in the last 3 years. I just look at it and go, unless Travis Head or Stephen Smith gets runs, the team really struggles. Like, and even in the Ashes series, that I was talking about last year, Smith didn't really get runs until the last test in Sydney. He only got about 150 runs in the first 4 tests. And then he's scored a truckload of runs in the last test in Sydney that got him to where he is now. But he didn't get many runs, and in this latest test, yes, Cam Green got 100, but even him, he hasn't really, before that 100, he hasn't really done much in the test arena. Like, he because a lot of people were really calling for his head, mainly because he's got a test average of 33 in the batting, and he's got a bowling average of 39. So it's not really like he's screaming to say, keep me in the side. And he's taken 39 wickets in 38 tests, so it's not even like, and that's with an average of 39.82. So it's not even like you could say he's taken, if he's played 38 tests, he's taken 90 or 100 test wickets at 30, say. You could say, well, you could pick him on, you could at least keep him in the side for his bowling, but, he's not even getting that. Yeah, so I just think Australia's at the moment. I just really hope that I'm wrong in this, where I say Australia does remain competitive, but I just think now I think Australia should be getting more used to losing games like the game to Bangladesh, just because until we find someone new, I just can't see how Australia's going to get to that high level. I hope I'm wrong, but yeah, let's see what happens. I'll be interested to hear your thoughts, and until next time, have a good one.